Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson were both interesting guys, very important men in early American history, and they each strongly disliked the other one. Hamilton was this guy who was a nobody from nowhere. He came over from the Caribbean as a young man and quickly climbed his way to the top through a combination of intelligence and incredibly hard work, and by making connections to the right people. And yet this average guy from nowhere thought that average people in general were not very smart and needed a powerful government to keep them in line. And a guy who late in his life became increasingly Christian, believed that a practice called dueling was wrong, and then he died in a duel. Go figure. Thomas Jefferson, meanwhile, was a guy who came from the wealthy plantation-owning class, a guy who owned lots of slaves, and yet he's famous for writing the Declaration of Independence, which talked about human rights. Human rights promoted by a slave owner. And a guy who was rich and powerful believed that average people were basically good and didn't need a strong government to keep them in line. So how do we make sense out of these two men, both filled with contradictions, whose belief systems sometimes seem to contradict their own backgrounds? I can't explain it entirely. All I know is that if Thomas Jefferson was alive, he'd be disappointed to find out that Alexander Hamilton is still famous and has now become a big Broadway star. Maybe Jefferson would hope that someday we would see Thomas Jefferson, the musical. Although if you ask me, that story would not be nearly as interesting as the rags to riches story of Alexander Hamilton.